Welcome to another episode of the Mind, Body and Pipeline podcast. This week I'm with Simon Turner. Simon's a senior marketing leader working for a company called Close to Order. He's been there for 16 years, and the last couple of years, health and fitness has played a big part in how he's maintained the growth of that business and the growth of himself. He had a bit of a shock when he went to the doctor that couple of years ago, and ultimately his age was not what it actually was. He had some out of shape, in inverted commas, thought fed back to him by the doctor, even though I think he felt he had a little bit of a routine. He wasn't in bad shape. Ultimately, the test came back and said that he needed to do something about his fitness. He's co-founded a marketing run club, and I'm sure that you will enjoy listening to everything he's done to take in health and fitness into his life and how he now fits it around a very busy role and increasingly busy family life with the young kids. Simon Turner and I chat for about an hour, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy it. Si, thanks again for coming on.
No problem. Great to be here, Guy.
Nice. And we've known each other for a number of months, and I'm familiar with what the business does, your fitness journey to a certain extent, but obviously we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But for people who don't know about Close to Order, don't know or maybe aren't as familiar with you, could you give a quick intro about what you do, what the business does? And then I'd love to hear how your focus on health and fitness has impacted the way that you approach work.
Sure. So I'm Simon. I'm the marketing director at Close to Order. We do branded clothing for uniforms, workwear, promotions, merchandise for businesses, teams and communities. I've been here for 16 years now, helping to grow the business out from relatively small stage to now being the UK's favourite. Over 27,000 Trustpilot reviews. So yeah, we're really proud of what we do and how we do it. And yeah, we've seen a lot of development improvements over the last few years, and I'd like to think I've helped along the way with some of those, and my fitness journey in the last couple of years in particular has definitely helped me. So it'll be interesting to unpack that a little bit today and hopefully share some of it with you.
Nice. That last couple of years, have you always been sporty? And then when you talk about that last couple of years, and you can build that journey up if you want from school days, was that last couple of years, is there a specific moment that sort of made you prioritize it?
Yeah, so I've really transformed in the last couple of years. I've always enjoyed sport to some degree, but I've never really had like a sport that I excelled at or anything. Over the last sort of 15, 20 years after finishing university all the way through to my mid-30s, I did very little. I'd do the occasional sort of K maybe, as I'd like to do it for charity. I'd train for a couple of months loosely, do the run, forget all about it and not run again for another 3 years until I did another charity run or whatever. So it's sort of a very sporadic, occasionally get into it, occasionally like play football on a Wednesday night or something every now and again, but I never really had a fitness routine. And by my mid-30s, I had sort of a realization that I was quite out of shape. I hadn't thought I was until I went for like one of these Bupa checkup things that you get, and they do all the sort of statistics on where you are on your VO2 max and things. And there I was thinking, you know what, I can probably run a bit, it'll come out all right. And I was like, when I did it, and he was like, yeah, it's all right. You're in like the bottom 40% for your VO2 max for your age or whatever. And I was like, wow, that was like a moment of realization that I'd slipped quite a long way down with my fitness, and I was nowhere near where I'd like to be. I think that feeling, the statistics behind it were quite shocking to me, that I had that. And you know, although I've naturally always been fairly slim, so I didn't realize it, but like things like cholesterol were quite high, and just in my mid-30s thinking that's not where I'd like to be. I've always thought of myself as a reasonably fit person. So that was a bit of a realization moment that made me think, right, this is it. I've got to get in shape. I've got a young family, which is one of the reasons I wasn't doing much exercise at the time. At the time I had 2 young boys, and until the eldest was sort of 6, I found it really difficult to find time to do any exercise, and that had got me to a point that I wasn't happy with. And that was one of those realizations that, you know what, I want to be fit and healthy dad. I want to be better at work, and I need to look after myself a bit more to be able to do those things.
Nice. Had you ever done a test like that before? And I ask that with my own knowledge of, I did my first one last October. I've just done my second one. Looking forward to the results. Was that blood test, well, just being honest, like stool sample? Was it that type of thing? Quite a deep one, and then a bit of analysis, and you get sort of a document at the end of it that measures everything?
Yeah, so it was like bloods and all the stuff related to that. There was like grip strength, there was VO2 max on the bike, all the BMI type stuff, and then it scored you as a percentage of where you were against the general population of your age. Yeah. And I kind of expected to rock up with doing zero exercise and still be like, at least top half. I was like, I'll get away with it, but I was finding that I wasn't getting away with it. Eating crap, doing no exercise, not sleeping well, which wasn't my fault. I blame the kids for that, but all that was having its toll, and the statistics showed that. And I thought, right, it felt this is time to do something about this now.
Yeah, the grip strength one's really interesting. I've never done one, but VO2 max, grip strength, all those other things, they've got a direct correlation to how sort of penetrable or impenetrable you are in later life with disease. I think the bloods and doing those types of tests are super important, but that's definitely a bit of an eye-opening moment where, yeah, maybe you're 35 or something, but your fitness age is like 44. You want it to be going the other way.
Absolutely. It was like, yeah, I didn't expect that. So it came as a bit of a shock.
You done another one since? Or do you do them yearly?
Yeah, it's every 2 years I tend to do them, and yeah, I did one since, and yeah, I was really pleased with the improvement. So yeah, VO2 max had gone from, I think, like 30th to 40th percentile to the 90th percentile. So I was really, really pleased to move that. And now, reading back what you referenced there, I've just been reading, I don't know if sounds like you've come across Peter Attia and his Outlive philosophy and book. Yeah, so just reading that, and yeah, like I say, the importance for future life and getting the most out of your current life for those sort of measures, and you can just feel the difference.
Yeah, we'll touch on that. So 16 years in the business has grown to where it is now, which is fabulous. 2 boys growing, everything that you've got going on with work, family life, social life outside of that, how do you manage, or how did you manage to build fitness into your weekly routine?
It was really about forcing the time for it at first and making it a priority. It sounds simple, but it wasn't a priority. So it was the thing that slipped. So it was, once I decided it was a priority, and it was almost like I'm putting that in my diary because I need to do this. It was that realization that I have to do this and I have to make time for myself one way or another. And it's kind of like pay yourself first type philosophy. You need to do that and set that time aside, and that's the thing that's one of the things you don't sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that helps build the habit. And once you've got the habit, then it feels a lot more natural. But at first it was making sure, I was going out. If I had to squeeze it in at lunch times, I'd go out for, it wasn't much at first because I wasn't in great shape. So if I was going out if I could go out for a 15-minute run at lunch at first, that was all I did. And it was making sure that I didn't just quit on it. I didn't say, no, I'm not going to do it today because I'm a bit tired, or ever think, what's the point in only going out for 15 minutes? If that was all I could get in, because the lunch break was the only time I had that day, I'd do it. And that just little by little built up the habit and allowed me to prioritize it. And then realizing that by prioritizing myself, it was having benefits in other areas. So it gets that virtuous circle then. It can be like, well, yes, I can afford to get up and go for a morning run, because I'm actually then, when I get back, I'll be better and more productive, like either in family life, like I'll be better with the kids if I've got a bit of energy and buzz about me that you get sometimes when you've done exercise, rather than just being like, well, I'll lie in bed as long as I possibly can, scrape myself out, grab a coffee and sit and watch TV with them. It's like, no, actually, if you get up, get about, I found for me that was making me a better person in general, or more like the person I wanted to be. Yeah. So yeah, it was forcing that time, making it a priority, and committing to it, and forming that discipline and commitment was really key to keeping it going. And
we'll touch on a couple of those things, because I think what you touched on a bit latterly there was about how the fitness routine has influenced the rest of your life, which is great. We'll dive into that. What's the routine that you've got now? You mentioned the diary. I've got one of those. Everything I do for myself is in bright orange. That's sort of me time, whether that's gym, recovery, some stretching, even if it's things like going to a gig with my wife, going out for dinner with my wife, I put it in the calendar, and those things don't move. They're in bright orange. Have you, because you're past the stage now, a couple of years on, of just nipping out at lunch, although having followed you on Strava, I know you do still do that sometimes, but have you got a bit more of a set routine, morning person? So you back to help the boys with school, or is there anything that sort of work? Are you an evening person with your runs when they're in bed? Do you sort of take yourself out?
Yeah, it's always changing, which is the interesting thing. I think with having working it with a family and especially with the kids, it's really changed over time. So there was a point where when they used to go to bed a little bit earlier, I'd go and do my runs in the evening after they were in bed. Now they don't tend to go to bed so early, so I'll try and get out straight after work. So I'm fortunate that quite often I'll work from home. So when I finish work at 5 or 5:30, I'll try and get out quite soon then, so then I can be back and still have the rest of the evening. Whereas before, when they were a bit younger and they were going to bed earlier, I'd be able to go out after they went to bed. So it's kind of, you've got to be a bit adaptive. Something I need to work on a little bit more, to be honest. Now I've been really good at it, particularly when I was training for an event. So like when I did Manchester Marathon in April, and in the run up to that, I was incredibly disciplined with a proper training plan, exactly like you described, with blocking out the time, looking at my week in advance, because I knew I had to do the runs, because otherwise the marathon was going to seriously hurt. So that was a absolute non-negotiable then. But I have slipped slightly since then when I've not had a formal event I'm training for. And it's something I need to get back to. But I try and just make sure that I know for the week what I'm doing. I've tried to mix up my training a bit as well. So I do a bit more running, a bit more weights now, to be a bit more varied, but I'll try and just fit those in around family and work as I can. But usually evenings are a good time for me.
Nice. Can you dive in? You mentioned that you feel that the exercise and running is really your weapon of choice, isn't it?
Running's what I've always enjoyed most.
Yeah. Better person. Can you dive a little bit?
Yeah, it's a big statement, I think, probably,
but it's not an uncommon one.
Yeah,
not an uncommon one, honestly, and it means different things to different people, I think.
Yeah, so I think I'd probably summarize it saying it gives me more energy, so I'm more energetic, I'm more confident, and I've got probably a broader mindset than I had. So I think sort of discovering sort of love for running, I'd got into a bit of a funk with like work and life. Work and home were basically my two things. I didn't feel like I had a particular interest or hobby, and so I felt a bit out of balance. I was all 100% work or 100% family and very little time for me. And I found that running outlet was a really important sort of third thing to put into the mix that gave me headspace to think in my mind, but also just the physical fitness I found gave me more energy to put in more back into those other areas of my life. So I think more energy, more able to keep up, more inspiration and ideas for work. So it just feels like it's a spark that helps ignite those other areas as well.
Yeah. And is there any direct correlation that you've seen, maybe something around the marathon training, but how when you push yourself physically, has it shaped the way that you set or approach things from a close to order perspective?
Yeah, so with goals, it definitely makes you think bigger once you've achieved something. So with running, I always like that you can be working on your distances and your speeds, and it's all very measurable. And as a marketer, that all correlates with everything at work as well. You know, you're trying to grow and improve all your key metrics, and that's got a lot of similarities with running. So when running, you realize you can achieve more than you thought possible. You know, it was one of the sparks again that got me into it, was seeing what other people were achieving with running, and I was thinking, God, I could never do that. You know, people run ultra marathons, I think absolute lunatics. How does anyone do that? But then I kind of just thought in my mind, well, why not? You know, I'm lucky, very lucky that I'm physically able and mentally able to take on challenges like that. And the only thing getting in my way was the mindset of thinking I couldn't do it, or I didn't want to prioritize doing that sort of thing. So that kind of switches over to business as well. Once you've achieved those bigger goals and see what you can do when you really set your mind to it, it does make you think that little bit bigger and more ambitious or more aggressive, or think what could you do that's a bit different in work. And that's certainly something I've tried to bring back to the table.
And that mindset you spoke about, you and I, when we caught up either on the Run Club or phone calls and things like that, I think you're an avid reader. Would that be fair or not? Do you pick books up that are interesting you at the time, or listen to podcasts? Is there anything in particular that's helped shape that?
Yeah, in terms of reading, more at the moment audiobooks. I don't have as much time to read. That's something that's sacrificed a little bit.
Audiobooks when you're on the runs as well.
Audiobooks for running, podcasts when running. It's a great time to absorb that. So I'll do a lot of that. I have really enjoyed. I just did read the Peter Attia book. That was great. I got some time and I thought, this is something I really want to read and absorb. Because I think you do absorb it better when you read it than you listen to it, or I do anyway. But yeah, I try and listen to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of podcasts, to get that inspiration and taking new ideas.
Yeah. What's the main driver to stay committed to health, both in the short term and in the long term?
So I think it started as a challenge and growth. It was something that I wanted to improve. I'd seen, as I said, those sort of metrics and feeling of physical and mental health not being where I wanted to be. So there was that initial driver to get going and, get myself into the position I wanted to be in from that perspective. But I think long term, now that I've seen the benefits, it's about how can I at the least maintain and ideally push these things as far as I possibly can. So, I've set goals of getting, like you say, getting fitter as I get older now. I'm not, about to turn 40 next year, and I want to be fitter when I'm 40 than I've ever been by all those metrics, but also by PBs or whatever it is. So there's very much a growth thing, but the reason behind all that, I think, is to stay healthy and happy throughout life. I think it gives me those benefits of sort of more energy, more motivation, bigger mindset. So I want to keep those things going and not let them slip. And as I get older, keep them in place and have that longevity and quality of life.
And have you had your boys out on a run with you?
Yeah, I've tried. They're more into their ball sports than they're running. Every now and again, I'll try and get them out, but I'm trying to. I think they do see the exercise element in both me and my wife, and I think it does sort of help them want to get away from the screens and stuff. So we do quite a lot of things together, like whether that's tennis or whatever. It'd be good to get them into running, but I'm also a big advocate of people got to find what's right for them. Yeah, I love running. It's worked for me, but that's not going to be for everyone. So I don't like to get preachy with it, and especially with my kids, if they want to do running, brilliant. I'd love to get out for a run with them, but if it's something else, it's whatever keeps you happy, motivated, and healthy.
Yeah, and your wife, what's her chosen sport or sports?
Yes, she's into sort of the HIIT type training. Of late, she's got into that, and over the last sort of 6 months, and doing really well with that side of things. And then she likes tennis and squash as well. So sort of the game and competitive element.
It helps, doesn't it? When I'm very lucky that Emma's as into what we do from a training perspective as I am. She signed up to the Manchester Marathon next year, and I don't think she's looking forward at the moment to her training starting in a couple of weeks' time. But it definitely helps, doesn't it, when your partner wants to carve out their own time to focus on their own health. And you mentioned that your wife, particularly in the last 6 months, again, this is about you, not about her, but it's just interesting for people to hear, because I think some people live with partners who are really not into it, and it's quite difficult, therefore, to carve out that time. Comes across as being selfish, but because it is, whilst you can do it for longevity for yourself and longevity for your family, it can be quite a selfish endeavor. Was there any challenges before, I suppose, the last 6 months when she really got into it? Has she always been sporty? Has she always been very supportive? What's that sort of journey been like, and that relationship with you and her and the sports stuff been like?
Yeah, so she's always been really supportive with it. So I've been very, very lucky from that side of things, because like you say, it's a big commitment, especially when you're doing the marathon block and you're going out, oh yeah, I'm off for a run, I'll be back in 3 hours, and then you're often done for the day as well. It's like, I know I've said it gives me more energy when you've done your 3 hour marathon long run. You just want to curl up in a ball in the corner. So you're not immediately better. So yeah, there is that, you've got to have that selfish element comes into it. So you've got to have the support of your family and things. So I've been very fortunate that that's been the case. But that's one of the reasons I probably didn't start until my kids were a little bit older. But I would, if I could go back and speak to myself from sort of 4 or 5 years before that, I would be really encouraging myself to keep it up more and to carve out that time if I could. But yeah, I didn't start until I was 36 was the year I remember getting those tests done, and just finding the time and starting up. But from like 30 to 36, I did very little, and that was because I felt in my mind I didn't have the time to go and do that stuff. Yeah. But I think the gradual build-up is important as well. So not going from naught to marathon training block is quite important for that adjustment as well for your lifestyle. So, it didn't start just going from not running at all. Suddenly I was out for, 12 hours a week, suddenly running. It started, like I say, now initially it was 20 minutes on my lunch break, and then it might want to be a half an hour run on a Saturday morning and whatever. So it's kind of gradual adjustment helps with that as well.
Yeah, no, it does. And then naturally you understand that she wants that time, and you just make it balance between her work, combined family life, but then her physical activities as well. And we've got some people at our gym as part of our community. He comes to the morning classes at 6 a.m. and she goes to the 5:30 p.m. classes, because they can't work it together. One of them's got to be at home with their kids, but they both love it so much that they just make it work and balance it between the two of them and the family.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. So I'm lucky again. Lucy's an early bird, so she'll get up and go to like a 5:30, 6 a.m. class before any of us are up, pretty much, and then she'll get back. And then the good thing, one of the things I like about running is that it does give complete flexibility for when I want to do it, so that I can then do it lunch, straight after work, and sometimes if I'm doing a long run, it will be in an evening, but we'll work that between us, and it works quite well. I think we both understand that you need that headspace for yourself to keep sort of happy and mentally healthy as well.
Yeah. What's the next sporting goal? I know you mentioned that you need a formal event. You understand that about yourself, which is important. That's such a common theme as well. People need something in there to fix their diet, to drink a little bit less, all those types of things. Have you got anything in mind? You got anything planned in?
The big one I've got for next year is I'm doing the lap again, which is going around Windermere. So that's 75k loop round. Did that last September. Doing the May one next year. So I've got to really build up my distance running again. So I want to build up that endurance. I want to really get focusing on doing that low cardio type work and building space for that. I think one thing I've done in the past is always focused on slightly higher intensity stuff, whether it's running and just going straight out at more breakneck speeds as much as I can. So I'm going to really try and focus on that low and slow build up, because I think that's going to be really important for my overall fitness over time. And then once I've done that, I'll revisit the marathon. So I've got unfinished business with that, because I've never run a good marathon yet, or one that I'm happy with. So I'm going to do the ultra in May, and then I'm going to think about what's next after that.
Nice. Which might lead us quite nicely on, when you just spoke then about never run a good marathon, to setbacks. It's a question got. You've obviously had them. You can talk specifically about the Manx Marathon if you want, or any other marathons, but there has been obviously a time where setbacks have affected you. What made you, I suppose a different way of asking that question is, did you fall off track? And then how did you get back on the track?
Yeah. So, I think the Manchester Marathon of this year is probably a good example because I completed it and I got a PB, so I should have been delighted with it, but I didn't finish strong. That was my main thing. So I've done 2 marathons, and they're both hurt an incredible amount. So the first one, I did 4 hours 10. I was aiming for sub 4, but the wheels just completely fell off at about 20 miles. I did get an injury in the build up, which was kind of used as an excuse, and thought, well, that was why. And then in my second one this year, I was shooting really probably for 3:45, and I came in at 3:55, which would have been okay. I think if I'd run a really consistent race and I'd finished feeling great, but again, I was probably on for 3:30 most of the way around, and then wheels came off. Again, maybe a couple of miles later this time, about 21 miles, and then I came home in I think 3:55. So yeah, it was a big PB on the previous one, but I know I've got this discrepancy between, like my half marathon PB is about 1:36, so I should really be running a marathon in 3:45, 3:50 without it being too horrific. It's just a bit off where I'd like to be. So I use that as obviously try and look at that as a positive of, that's fuel for doing it again. But I think I felt like I needed to take a little break from the marathon after this last one, because you put so much into it in terms of the training. I trained so hard for this last one, and then to feel like when I came in, it was like, wow, I thought I'd come in a bit stronger than that in the finish. It was quite tough to get over that immediately. It was like, I thought I was going to finish and feel a lot stronger than I did at the end. So I decided I'm just going to take a mental break from the marathon and focus on other things. I really switched over. That was when I basically just done pure running for 2 years and done very little else, to bring in strength training into the mix, to give me something else, just to focus on something different for a bit. So the goal there is build a wider fitness base that covers, keep up running and building that more endurance base, as I've said, with the ultra next year, but also focus on building some strength, which I think is vital to that all-round fitness, and might be one of the reasons that I didn't do so well in the marathon. Just having that strength is probably important. So I'm going to reset a bit, and that was one of the ways I looked at it. I'm just going to reset. I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to change my goals slightly. And that's helped, I think, take the pressure off a little bit, of rather than saying I could have just said, right, I'm going to do another marathon in 6 months, and maybe that would have been fine. But I think I felt better resetting, taking a different approach, varying my activities, and then knowing I'm going to revisit it and hopefully smash it in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, no, I think that I did a session this afternoon where it was all about conditioning. So actually I didn't really work up much for sweat, but I'm struggling to stand on my legs now, and it was using the band, standing on boxes, doing like 1-leg piston squats and things like that. And I think that's, like you said, those low and slow runs, you have to put that type of exercise in. It's not just about doing squats, it's about getting that deep conditioning within those muscles that some people just have God-given, I think, or they do a lot more through their 20s than they think. I had this big gap where I didn't do much else apart from run for about 12 years. So I know that I have to go right back to basics. And I think what you're doing is only going to benefit, particularly those last 4 or 5 miles. I think it's a good tactic, really good tactic. The nutrition, did you dissect any of that? We haven't spoke about your nutrition, so maybe a good place to dip into it. But is that something that you dissected as a potential cause? Is your nutrition on point? Is it better now than it was? Could you tell a bit of a story about, your eating?
I think nutrition is probably the biggest hole in my training. I think I've got, reasonably big ticks against the amount of training I do or have done for events. Sleep is another one I find really important. After missing out on so much sleep while the kids were young, I'm now a pro at getting my solid 8 hours a night, and I'm pretty good at getting that. So sleep and exercise, I think I've got those two, relatively strong. But nutrition is probably my weakest area. I think that's where I struggle to. I'm not terrible. I don't like get takeaway every night or whatever, but I've not got a structured nutrition plan particularly. I have tried to increase protein recently. I think that's one thing I have tried to pick up again after the marathon. Nutrition is one of the things I did dissect a bit and think, well, right, what am I is that a potential cause? So I think I probably wasn't eating enough protein, so I've really upped that. But other than that, I'm not as disciplined around nutrition as I probably could or should be. So it's an area for improvement still, for sure.
Recovery? How are you with your stretching and things like that? Do you ice bath? Do you go to we'll talk about it in a bit, because you upping your strength and all that type of thing. Are you a member of a gym where you do some recovery work, where you got a sauna? Is that important to you? Is it now important and it wasn't?
Yeah, recovery. You're picking my weaknesses out now again. Recovery is another area for improvement. I'm reasonably good at getting down days, so I try and always structure my training so that I've got a recovery day probably twice a week. They're fairly active recovery as well, just naturally through life, getting out with the kids and whatever, going for walks. So I think I've got that aspect of recovery is okay. But now I've got a home gym set up, so I just do work at home, so I don't have like access to a sauna or anything like that, and I don't ice bath or any of those sort of additional things that you can jump into. So I try and get, after I've done long runs, I use Mountain Fuel's my sort of brand of choice for my day-to-day running nutrition, and there's like recovery pouches and stuff I'll have after a particularly long run. But again, that's one of the areas for potential improvement for sure.
Nice. I know. I think everybody could probably improve on those things.
Yeah, as I say, I think sleep is probably the most important element of recovery, though, and that's something I do focus on trying to make sure I get regularly. In particular, for me, I've identified that alcohol's really bad for me with my sleep, so I try and really limit that now. I don't drink a great deal anymore, and that's mainly because of the impact it has on sleep and recovery. And that's not just fitness wise, that's just again in terms of life. It doesn't agree with me. So that's something that I identified nutrition wise, which benefits sleep. That's been a big win for recovery, I think.
Now, you and I met through a community properly, met through the Marketing Run Club community. That community, but then other communities outside of that you might have found with Park Run or through anything that you've done, the business opportunities that have come through that. Can you talk a little bit? Have you seen any? If you haven't seen any, could you see some? Talk a little bit about those communities that, I know the answer to this, obviously, but talk a little bit about those communities and how they've benefited from a work perspective.
Yeah, so it's one of the things I didn't mention with the sort of general benefits of getting involved in fitness and exercise, but community's been huge for me. I co-founded the Marketing Run Club, and that's really helped me expand a network. It wasn't done necessarily with any intention behind it, other than noticed there was a lot of great people who I really liked and respected in the marketing field, who were also really keen runners. It's like bring those two together in a Venn diagram, and you've got in the middle a nice little community of people who can chat about like-minded interests and share on both the fitness and the business side. So that's been a really important community for me, and it's created some great connections which have certainly helped for business, be that directly through, I'm sure a lot of people now buy their merch through Clothes to Order, which is great if they need that in the business. But more importantly, that sort of growth mindset and seeing what some people are achieving is just phenomenal. There's people in that group who do the most incredible things and have the most incredible mindsets, and they're so open and share with the community, and that's been really powerful to help push, which, as we've covered, benefits all areas, not just encouraging you to run a little bit further. You see what people are achieving in business and gives you ideas and inspiration. So that's been really important for me, community and getting out there and networking, and the confidence to do it as well. I think confidence is something I've not touched on, but I've felt a lot more confident since I've been getting into fitness, whether it's directly linked or not. I can't say for sure, but I do definitely use some of the achievements sometimes as fuel if I'm thinking something's a bit scary or whatever. Like if I had to do a public speaking thing, has never really been my scene in terms of something I would relish. But nowadays you can think back, well, some of the things that you've achieved, like if you can run an ultra, you can get up and stand and talk for 10 minutes in front of a room of people.
Yeah,
So you can kind of use those mental tricks, things you can put in your cookie jar to pull out when you need them.
And you've made, well, my perception of it is you've made some friends as well through that community.
Absolutely.
Work, I suppose, marketing interest, fitness, health, running interest, and from there, business development opportunities come. Of course they do, but then you've got friendships because you've got things in common.
100%. So that came first and foremost. Like I say, it wasn't formed as a business opportunity or a networking group or anything. It was about, there's some great people who it'd be great to get to know better and share those like-minded experiences. And lucky to count all the guys in that group as friends, and really has expanded that circle and the sort of influences you have. I think it was someone in the group who shared the saying that you're the accumulation of your 5 closest friends or whatever, and I'm lucky to have some very good friends in my life from way back, but also newer influences coming in through people I've met through running and through those communities has really impacted me.
And those friends that you spoke about then, are they into older friends, as in you've had them for longer? They into running? They into activities? Do you meet up and do 10Ks or because I spoke to a founder not long ago, and something similar happened to me actually, is I had such a lifestyle that when I gave up the booze, I lost quite a few of that group of friends, and there's a guy I met recently actually who just got into his health and fitness, and he goes to the pub now less frequently than he did with the guys. And the first few times where he rocked up and had a lime and soda, and he's knocked alcohol on the head as well, but it's not just to be more dedicated to fitness stuff. He's done it for other reasons as well. But we got the jibes and things like that. Have you ever had anything like that, or are those guys sort of on a journey with you? Therefore, I suppose that common ground has maybe changed, but has continued as you've got into your 30s and late 30s.
It's a real mix. Very fortunate I've not had any of the jibes and too much like that. I think we're a pretty supportive group as it goes. He was probably actually my best mate from home, who I'm sure won't mind me saying, like 20 years back, if he was to tell you he was going to be running ultras and stuff, he'd have been the first one to laugh and tell you where to go. But he started doing some of this stuff just before I did, and I think that was definitely part of the inspiration, seeing some of the stuff he was doing. I think he ran an ultra, and it was I had just started getting into running, but I was sort of thinking along the lines of 10Ks, and I think I'd just done my first half marathon, and him and his wife went and did this 2-day ultra challenge where they did 50K on Saturday, 50K on Sunday. And that was one of those moments I mentioned that you realize there's people doing stuff like, at the time I was like, you're absolute madman. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And I just think I couldn't, it was like, I couldn't do that. But I thought, well, why not? You're doing it. I would say, didn't look like he was having a great time, I'll be honest, but he did it. It was a massive achievement, and that was helpful. So it's helpful that there are people in that group who do that. But as I say, I think it's always really important to me that I'm not ever getting preachy, and I've got lots of really good mates who don't run, don't do any exercise, and if I can rub off a little bit that they'll maybe start doing couch to 5K or whatever, that'd be amazing. But it's up to each individual person to find what they want to do.
Nice. No, I agree. Which leads us quite nicely on. Bit of a closing question. For business leaders who are thinking about prioritizing their health but don't really know where to start, what's the one piece of advice that you would offer to get them going?
I'd say just start. It sounds so simple, but I think complexity can be the enemy of execution. We're thinking it too much at the very beginning. I mean, it depends where you are, of course. If this business leader's already doing quite a lot of exercise and it's really about kicking on to the next level, it's very different. But if you're in the position I was in, 2-3 years ago, from doing nothing, the idea of getting started being complicated and really hard work was kind of putting me off. And I'd say just getting out, putting it into your routine, as little as that is, it doesn't matter. You're making a start, And that's what's important. So I would say just start, try and enjoy it if you can. If it's making you miserable, try something different. If you really hate it, find what works for you. It might be running, it might be, other sports, it might be the gym, it might be classes, whatever it is. Find what works for you and that you can get some benefit out of. If it feels like too much of a trudge, I think I'd have struggled. Whereas with runs, I really, at least, even if I wasn't obviously enjoying it, I kind of flipped my mindset to be like, well, no, hang on, this is me. I'm out in the countryside. I'm getting out, I'm getting fresh air. I'm not going to run to the point immediately where I'm going to be feeling like I'm killing myself and making it miserable. So at first, just start, try and enjoy it and try and build it into your routine.
Nice. Appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks, Guy. Good to catch up.
Cheers.